Welcome to the Desert Sanctuary with Carl and Laura Forehand.
Often when we have doubts about religion, or we want to be contemplative, or simply ask questions, it can feel like we are wandering out into the desert.
We would like to welcome you to our sanctuary, the Desert Sanctuary.
We've tried to pick guests that resonate with our fellow friends and seekers here in the desert.
Our hope is that you will find life for your body, soul, and spirit.
And now, here is our show. Hi, welcome to the Desert Sanctuary. I'm Laura Forehand, and I'm here with Carl Forehand as he takes a drink.
I'm trying to get some food and water in me. It's been a long day.
Anyway, we're glad that you're with us today on the podcast. And we are here with, he's a new friend to me. I don't know about you, but we met Larry Jordan. We actually met him and his wife Jill in person when we were visiting my sister in Texas. So
one of the highlights of our trip.
It really was. We had such a great conversation with both of them, but we are so happy to have Larry on the podcast. How are you today, Larry? Welcome to the Desert Sanctuary podcast.
I'm great. Thank you so much. It's just great to see both of you.
You too.
Yeah, I liked your book. It's called The Way, correct?
Yes.
And I remember liking it. I remember sending you something about it. But then we've kind of talked quite a bit over the past few, however many, whatever's it's been. But I was glad we got to meet you in person, and Jill, as Laura said. Mm-hmm. But let's just start it off by having you tell your story. Your story is slightly different than some of the people, but that's good, because we want to hear the same story over and over again, even though we'll listen to it. Tell us your story about how you've kind of evolved spiritually, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much. And I appreciate both of you. You know, I've read several of your books. I just got through my advanced copy of Leaning In, and I loved it. And I think in the books, and Carl and Laura both, you know, in all our interactions, I just think you guys are truth tellers. And, you know, you've given me a lot of help. I'm early in the publishing process. At the time we're speaking, the book is not out yet. But, you know, you've been really helpful to me in terms of where to go and what to do with it. So I appreciate it. Okay, so I'm about 60. I just turned 65, just went on Medicare. I was raised as a Roman Catholic. I went to church in a Catholic church for 50 years. It was kind of a dry, sort of, you know, guilt-ridden spirituality, very formal, ritualistic, of course. But, you know, for a long time it worked for me. I was the oldest. I was a real conservative guy. I was kind of, as Laura describes herself, I was kind of a rule follower. And so as I got into middle age, you know, I started asking questions about the church. My kids started asking me questions about the church. And then, you know, 9/11, those two planes hit the buildings. And I thought, oh my gosh, you know, somebody did that in the name of religion. I don't know enough about Islam. And so I started reading Islam. And the first thing I realized was, well, the planes hitting the buildings had nothing to do with Islam. I mean, that's not Muhammad. That's not the Quran. That's not Islam. But I realized how much I didn't know about Islam. I also realized how much I didn't know about Christianity, because as I was kind of trying to orient it towards, well, how does this fit with what I believe? You know, I kind of had to rethink what I believed and why I believed it and where it came from. I kind of discovered, to my surprise, honestly, that a lot of things that I had been brought up with that I thought were authentic and original and unchanging and universal, it's just not true. You know, there's a lot of things in Christianity that, you know, that were man-made, that are subject to which books you want to put in the Bible and which versions you want to read and how you want to interpret them. And, if people say, well, I'd like to go back to original Christianity. And I often say, well, original Christianity was Jewish. It was in the temple. There was no Bible. There was no clergy. There was no doctrine. There was no pope. There was no justification by faith. There was no original sin. There was no substitutionary atonement. There was no Trinity. So who's with me? And that sounds very different than the church that we have today.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, as I was reading particularly about Islam is a mystical religion. And these people have really intense experiences of God, not just an understanding of God, but an experience of God. And I thought, well, why aren't there any Christian mystics? And of course there are. Many of them are Catholic. Nobody knows about any of them.
Yeah.
And so the study
weren't liked by the church, right? I mean,
absolutely,
they were liked, at least.
Yeah, they were defrocked and tortured and martyred, and because the church really wanted to broker that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So then, I'm very well read, but all the books are old because I get all the books at used bookstores, and I don't read them until somebody else throws them out. but I would read a book, and it would make me realize, well, there's something that I didn't understand. There's something I don't know. And so I ended up reading 1,000 books. And of course, you would read something and it would send you into history, or would send you into psychology, or would send you into philosophy or theology. So I started sort of developing a map in my head of, well, how does this all work? And I had a friend, a very, very close friend who has since passed away far too soon, who said, you really need to look at the Eastern religions. And, I had these ideas about Hindus, worshiping statues, and Buddhists who didn't believe in God. And it all sounded very foreign to me. I still had some residual fear, I guess, from church that, well, no, don't go there. You don't even want to flirt with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I took them up on it, and I really found a lot of wisdom in the Eastern religions. And it also showed me that religion is cultural. And for instance, the first chapter of my book talks about the Eastern worldview versus the Western worldview. In the West, just to make, paraphrase a little bit, it's very individualistic. We believe in personal responsibility. That's our politics. We believe in personal salvation. That's our theology. So it says, well, the universe was created. Well, in the East, they don't believe it was created. They believe it was eternal. So you don't worship a creator God. And then they say, well, we believe God's a person, or God is three persons. And in the East, they say, well, we don't think that what you call God is a person, and it's somehow expressed the way that Paul Tillich in the Christian tradition says God is the ground of being. And the way I express it in my book is, I think of God not as the architect of the universe, but the architecture of the universe. I think of myself not as an individual person who bangs into every other person like a billiard ball, but somebody that's a thread that's woven into the fabric of the universe. And that's just a very different understanding. So somebody says, well, do they believe in God? Well, not so much. Now, if you're woven into the fabric and God is not out here, God is really inside and outside and all around.
Right.
There's no such thing as original sin. There's not a way that you can come apart from God. So a Christian would say, well, then what did Jesus die for? I think it's a tragedy that Jesus died. I think Jesus showed us how to live. But, if you understand things the way that I do from the Eastern tradition, there was no rift. There was no need for atonement. Well, what happens when you die? I don't know. But
it's the authentic thing you can say.
Yeah.
Times.
Right, exactly. But in the East, there's a practice. Who am I? And you ask, who am I? And I said, well, I'm a grandfather. Well, you weren't always. Okay, well, I'm a retired guy. Well, you weren't always. Well, I'm married. Well, you weren't. well, I'm conservative or liberal. Well, you weren't, and all of a sudden, okay, well, yeah, everything that is myself is something that I think about me or something that other people think about me. And as Thomas Merton, again, in the Christian tradition said, a mystic, we all live lives of self-impersonation. So in the East, I have a Zen practice, so I'll kind of get to that a little bit later, but, and the purpose of the practice is to find our true self, which is really no self, which is really everybody's one self. I'm not just living my separate life. I'm living part of our whole life, same life that you're living. And it's just a very, very different way of looking at things. People say, well, do you think you have a soul? No. They say, well, I'll pray for you. Well, don't pray for me. You don't have a soul either. And I'm not absolute about anything. I'll talk about that too. But, show me my soul and I'll believe that I have one. Tell me what my soul does and I'll believe when I have one. Well, so you just think that you just think that it's lights out when you die? I said, well, it could be. It could be that that I get stirred into the soup metaphysically, like I get stirred into the soup physically when I get buried. And, maybe there's mind that's bigger than my body and my brain, where something about me is recalled. There's certainly memories and friends that hopefully will think of me fondly. But yeah, I don't think that I'm going to pop up someplace and either be really excited or really disappointed. And the other thing, and I wish I would have come to this sooner in the journey, was I'm not sure that I have free will. I at least don't have as much free will as I think that I have. And, a lot of the things that I do are determined by my biology and my chemistry and my physics. The rest of it is largely determined by the way I was raised and the people that I ran into and the experiences that I had. Some of it is randomness. I don't believe that I live in a deterministic world. I just believe that that it's all one, it's all one big, huge experience, and I'm seeing just a little tiny piece of it, and that I'm not controlling as much as I thought that I was controlling. And that one thing really, it's like the wobbly piece in the Jenga pile. If I don't have free will, God didn't really need to tell me what to do. He didn't really need to provide 12 commandments, because I don't have any control over what I do or think or say. Nobody's going to judge me on what I do or think I say, because I don't have any control over what I do or think or say. And it's a very difficult thing for people to grapple with. Most people say, well, I have the impression that I have free will, and I do too, and I'm not absolute about it. And I say, I'm sure of this. We don't have as much free will as we think that we have. And even if you only have half as much free will, does that mean if you're going to hell, you're going to spend half an eternity? It starts getting wobbly. Kind of the thing that broke it for me, they said, well, let's study the brain. We can do that now. We can watch somebody do something. We can see when they decided to do it. How long before you take an action did you decide to take an action? And what they found was that you decided to take an action up to 10 seconds after you took the action. So your brain is not the engineer that's driving the train. He's the conductor that's calling out the towns as the train from the back of the train, as they're driving by. So I got to a really dark place where I thought that I was just exploring my spirituality. I was just going to roast some weenies, and I burned the whole freaking house down, because, I didn't believe anything that I used to believe anymore.
Can I ask you a question there?
Sure.
So, because I can resonate with, you growing up and living the Catholic denomination lifestyle of certainty for so long, right? And I get that because I grew up Lutheran and everything was just, like you said, dry, it's cut and dry, follow the rules, you'll be, fine kind of thing. And then you go to this place of uncertainty. Like, can you talk about how that settled in you? I mean, maybe it was a process, but so did you slowly get comfortable with all the uncertainty? Because you're really speaking from this place of, I'm really not certain about anything. And I mean, that's how I feel too. I can't put my finger on any one thing and say, that's it, So, I mean, can you share a little bit of that journey going from such a certain, religion to this uncertainty, basically?
Yeah, it's like grief, and there's a lot of fear, and there's anger, and there's sadness, and then eventually there's acceptance. I talked to Jim Palmer recently. Jim Palmer is his thing is a non-theistic spirituality, which is very much in line with where I am. And people have kind of an existential crisis of, well, I don't know if there's a God. I don't know why I was created. I don't know where I go when I'm dead. He said that the second thing is kind of, well, as I start to recede, as I start to say, I don't think I'm going to church anymore. Well, now my family and friends are looking at me. Now it turns out I'm probably not going to Bible study. I'm probably not going to book club. I'm probably not going to the turkey dinner. I'm really starting to lose a lot. And then the third thing is anger. I went through a period where, and I'm not an angry person, and I'm really not an angry person now, but I went through a period where I'd get on the internet and I'd go looking for people to pick fights with. And, that's not a good place to be. And so, and then the final thing is, after people leave, they're still haunted by their old beliefs. They are still thinking, well, what if there is a God? What if I got this completely ass backwards? And instead of being angry, at all the people that tried to save me and angry at myself for accepting it, I should be angry at myself only for rejecting it, because I might be going to hell. So you have second thoughts.
Yeah.
So it was very difficult. But here's the thing. I used to have a creed, and it was either supernatural events or, man-made speculation, or really things that resulted in treating people unkindly, LGBTQ people, women, in the case of Catholics, non-Christians. And so I have a one-line creed now. It comes from the mystics and the Eastern religions and all the findings of science. And my one-line creed is, everyone is related and everything is connected. Now, people say, well, that seems kind of trite. I said, no, it's very profound. It's more profound, and it's more practical. It's more defensible. It's less dangerous than anything I ever learned in church.
Yep.
And, in the last few years, you can imagine I'm writing this book, and it's opening my mind, and I'm thinking, well, everybody's connected. Everybody's related. So in my life, somebody said, well, how do you feel about banning Muslims? How do you feel about building walls? How do you feel about separating families? How do you feel about taking away people's health care? How do you feel about marginalizing LGBTQ people? Look, if your creed is everyone is related and everything is connected, you don't do any of that stuff.
Yeah.
So there's this clarity. And then all of a sudden, and my friends tell me I kind of overtell this story, but I just suffice to say I was a very transactional guy. 20 years ago, the idea that I would be sitting here having a conversation about spirituality, nobody would believe it. I would not be sitting here unless there was a fee in it, unless there was a deal to be done. And so it just opened me up. And all of a sudden, perfect strangers, total acceptance. I mean, there's no judgment. I don't care who they are. I don't care what they think. everyone is related, everything is connected. So it was profound. And that's really where the book came from. My kids sat me down one time and said, what happened to you? I mean, you were this, conservative, Catholic, transactional guy, and now you're all warm and wet, and you have all these relationships, and you have all this connection. There's all this service in your life. What happened to you? And I said, look, I could not tell you in a sentence. I mean, I read 1,000 books. I sweated in a sweat lodge. I chanted the Shiva. I whirled with the dervishes. I meditated in a Zendo. I'd have to write a book to tell you. And they both said, you need to write that book like now.
Yeah. It's Paul Young all over again, right?
There you go. Yeah. And it's very, it's transformed me. And I tell people, church didn't do it for me. Religion didn't do it for me. Spirituality really did it for me. And so I have found a place. I have a Zen practice. In a Zen practice, nobody tells you, well, here's introduction to the Buddha, an introduction to the Heart Sutra, and this is what we believe you should do. They basically say, how's your practice? How are you meditating? How are you thinking about things like a Zen person would think about things? And the only intent of your practice is to find your true self, which is no self, which is the same self as everybody else's self. And I got to Zen not because I was looking for it. I sort of stumbled into it, and I realized this is the only thing I have found that makes sense to me. And if I had to boil Zen down, I would say everyone is related and everything is connected. And I'm in a place now. People say, are you an atheist? I said, well, an atheist is somebody who does not believe in a personal God. They don't believe in a God of the Bible. So I probably am an atheist. Well, might you be an agnostic? I said, well, I'm open to everything. I've changed my mind so many times in the last 20 years. I would never say there's not a God. It'd be great if there's a heaven. I hope I go there. I just don't think there is. And there's kind of one of the big questions I bumped into that nobody can answer is, does the universe have order, or does it have intention? We can look around and we can see that everything works the way it's supposed to, and everything's very complicated. So I don't know if there was a creator that made it that way or whether it evolved that way. And either way, it is awesome. It is stupendous. It is wondrous. And so I have this deep connection to everything around me, wherever it came from. And if you ask the Buddha, well, is there a God? What's the meaning of life? Is there an afterlife? He says, that's all speculative. I mean, nobody knows. What we're here for is to find our true selves, to eliminate or reduce suffering as best we can for ourselves and for everybody else. So it's not. Oh, and then I'm a humanist because I think, well, there may be design, there may be intention, there may be a God. What I call the architecture of the universe might be animated. It might be loving me. And I'm wide open to that, and I'd love it. But I'm not. I'm agnostic about it, and I really feel like if there is anything supernatural to the universe or to God, if there's anything going on that's past biology or chemistry or physics, I can't count on it jumping into my life and making everything okay for me or for anybody else. So it's my job, and I've heard people even express it. I'm trying to bring the kingdom of God, whether there's a God or not. It's my job either way. And, people say, well, who's Jesus to you? Well, that's a really interesting one. We wrestle with, well, are we justified by faith or are we justified by works? And I wish that we had an answer to that question. You do. I mean, if you go back and read the story of the rich young man, how can I be saved? Jesus says, Well, follow the commandments. Sounds kind of Jewish.
Mhm.
Do good things. Sounds kind of Catholic.
Mhm.
Drop everything and follow me. So that's what I did. And, we retired 12 years ago, and we spent our life in service. We went to Africa and taught school, and we were at camps for kids with disabilities. We drove veterans to the VA. And all of this is reinforcing everybody's related, everything's connected. I'm doing all this reading. I'm spending all these time in sweat lodges. I'm spending all this time getting to know people as I'm driving to the VA, and I'm just thinking, this is just the life that I never knew I was living. That I'm getting it. And even if I'm wrong, even if I get somewhere and there's somebody judging me and they said, well, did you screw up or not? I said, I don't think so. I tried to bring the kingdom of God, whether there's a God or not. I took Jesus seriously enough that I'm the only guy I know that did what he said I should do. Now, I realized in that I was blessed to be able to do that, and that not everybody can just say, well, I'm just going to spend my life in service. But we did that. So I really bristle when something, we basically left the Catholic Church one day when they told my wife, who's Presbyterian, well, you really can't have communion here. You're not Catholic. Mm-hmm. So we just left. And I left the Protestant church, very liberal denomination, when they told me, well, I don't even know if you're Christian. Mm. And I said, well, I don't know if I'm Christian or not. I follow Jesus in a way that no one else I know has. But I do know this. It's really not your job to tell me whether I'm Christian or not.
Right.
Right. So I'm out, I'm, as you say, in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
I meet other people, and they've had similar experiences, and they're angry. Mm. Everybody is angry. And I say, well, I probably still have a little residual anger. This is all a process. Nobody's at the end of it. I'm certainly not. Mm-hmm. But I think you're closer to the end of it, the less anger that you have. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I ask people, if you've left church, where's your community and what's your practice? And a lot of people don't really have a community, and they don't really have practice. And, if you ask me that, I'd say, well, I have a Zen practice. I speak sometimes at the Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm in a book club at Unity. I go to Bible study with the Methodists. I spend 2 months of the year in Colorado, where I visit the ashram and the Shinto Center and the Zen Center. And I even go to Catholic Mass, if you can believe it. So, and at the end of the year, when we make our donations, I write money, I write a check to the Buddhists and a check to the Catholics and a check to the Hindus and a check to the Universalists, because I think they're all bringing the kingdom of God, mm-hmm. whether they believe in God or not. Mm-hmm. And, so I have community there. I have community doing things like this. I mean, right. When you folks went, I was mentioning to Carl, when you folks went to Dallas, I'm following you on Facebook, and you had a half a dozen meetings with people. The meeting that you had with us was pretty rich, and I thought, if their life is anything like mine, it looks like it is. They have quite a bit of community, even though, neither one of us is spending all of our time in the same big building.
Right.
And then practice, and I know you do some of this, but I mean, meditation and journaling and practice gratitude and, spend a lot of time in nature. I do a lot of spiritual reading. Even though I read 1,000 books, I'm on my way to reading another 1,000. So it's just a very, very rich life. And if somebody says, I feel so bad for you because you left church, oh my God, I'm just so much more open-hearted and open-minded. I have such a tolerant belief system. I have such a vital community. I have so much practice in my life. It's just warm and wet and deep and broad, and it's something that I hope other people can find. And when people say, well, I've given up on church, I've given up on religion, I've given up on God, I've given up on spirituality, I sort of think, well, you haven't really looked hard enough. what you really mean is I have a pretty narrow view of all those things because of what I was taught. And what I'm rejecting is that narrow part of life experience that I didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
But, if you say, well, I don't like religion because of all the doctrine. Well, do you think Buddhism is a religion? Zen does not have any doctrine. Well, I don't believe in God. Well, have you been to the United Church of Christ? You're welcome there.
Mm.
Have you been to Unity? You're welcome there. Have you been to the Unitarian Universalist Church? You're welcome there. There's just there's so much diversity out there. There's so many ways that people can enrich their own lives and enrich other people's lives that I push back a little bit when somebody says, I've left all that. No, you've left some of it. You have not seen the good parts, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So many when we're inside of, especially evangelical Christianity, we wondered, what was out there. We wondered about people that were out there. And so a lot of people inside the church talk about, well, if you discount the Bible and where you get your morality, or if you're not in this small group, speaking of evangelical Christianity, then how do you know how to act? It's like but here's what I've been experiencing in what we call the desert. Some of the most beautiful people I've ever met are out here. They're kind. They may have been originally taught in Christianity, but that's not where they're getting their cues from now. It doesn't have to be a Zen practice. Some of them have no practice. And I agree, we'll probably develop something eventually, right? We'll find what fits us. But even when we find a practice or an idea, the temptation is to go, oh, this is it, and then this is the only thing. It's the only way. And what I was so afraid of for so many years has turned out to be the least thing that I should be afraid of.
Right.
Because so many beautiful people. And if we're all connected, I read Rob Bell's book called Everything is Spiritual. In that he said, we're all connected. It's bigger than we thought. And maybe the universe is, well, I don't know if it's a math problem or a conversation or whatever, quantum physics keeps changing that.
Yeah.
And what is it really? Well, can we just, and I'm just giving you a lot of random thoughts here, but can we just stay open?
Yeah. And
keep evolving? That's how we like to describe it. Keep moving forward. I want to make progress. I want to do better. Not to please any group or any person, but just want to keep discovering. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah. I've had two really, really good friends who are very conservative evangelical. The one of them, he's the type of person that, will stay up all night talking or, texting or whatever. He's very deep. He likes to talk about things, but he's very conservative evangelical. And he said that he knew I was working on a book. He said, "Can I see it?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you'll like it." He said, "Well, I don't have to like it. I just like to look at it." And so he savaged the book. He and you've read the book. It's a very kind book. It leaves a lot of room.
Non-threatening. Yeah.
And so, but he just took issue with everything that he disagreed with that I said. And when it came to the second part, the book is a deconstruction and then a reconstruction. And the reconstruction is the Eastern religions and the mystics and the science. Well, he didn't even address that. He was just interested in protecting his turf, fighting for his beliefs, making sure that, and, I took the position, well, he's a friend and I'm a little disappointed. I don't really think that he meant well when he did that. But it's going to be a better book because he was triggered, and I didn't mean to trigger anybody. So I'm going to go back and look at some of those things that triggered him and fix them. Now, we just, since I've got the book written, we don't talk as much, and he often comes back and says, "I wish we talked more," and I do too. And one time he says, I have a lot of doubts myself, and you are the only person that I can confide in, the only person that I can share with, the only person that understands doubt. And you always treat me respectfully, and I try to treat you respectfully as well. And I said, yeah, I'm glad to do that. The other, I had a conservative evangelical friend who came to Colorado and tell me about your book. I told him, oh boy. He says, I think that the earth was created 6,000 years ago. The dinosaurs died in the Great Flood. And I said, this is just me talking, but we're at 8,000 feet. I don't think the water got that high. I don't know where all that water came from. I don't know where all that water went. I don't know why we don't find dinosaur bones and Neanderthal bones in the same place. But, and this is kind of a mantra for me. You might be right. I wasn't here 6,000 years ago. I wasn't here 13 billion years ago. You might be right. And then I said, because we're really close, and I could talk to him like I can talk to you, I said, I understand it, but I don't necessarily like it. You are unable to look me in the eye and say, you might be right. And he said, yeah, you're right. Sorry about that, but you're right. So next couple of days, we did all this hiking and just had great fun. He had some kind of a spiritual experience on the mountain that I still need to learn a little more about. But we were sitting there smoking cigars and drinking scotch and looking at the mountain we had just come off of. And he said, that conversation about the global flood? And I said, yeah. He said, you might be right. And nobody had to win or lose. Nobody was stomping around. Nobody was embarrassed about it. It was just, this is where I am and this is where you are. And we can agree that, we can agree to disagree. So it was really beautiful. And I've had, I talk about, you might be right, whenever I have an author talk or something. And I saw this woman I hadn't seen in 6 months. It's just, oh my gosh, I think about you every day. And that's a little strange. I've been married for 42 years. And, she said, you might be right. She said, it's life-changing. She said, I say that so many times. It ends so many arguments that might have become disagreeable. It begins so many conversations that turn out to be really agreeable. And she said, it's life-changing.
Yeah.
That was one of the biggest takeaways, I think, from our lunch together, because you shared that story, and like that was even, I think, eye-opening and revolutionary for us. Like, because I think that's kind of our human nature, maybe, is to be on the defense, right? Like especially with the things that we believe. And I know for sure, like in the churches that we were in, you defended what you believed to the point of arguing, losing friends, losing family. And so when you said that, it like we both just kind of looked at each other like, and, we talk about like gaslighting and things that are like conversation stoppers. But I think saying something like, you might be right, it pauses the conversation that could go in a really ugly direction. And like you said, just opens it up to take that conversation in a different direction. So I really loved that when you shared it with us.
Yeah, it's not, if you think about it, it's not really a huge concession, right. And it also, there's the unspoken part is, you might be wrong too.
Right.
And, it doesn't occur to people.
Right.
It doesn't occur to people.
I think I shared with you my story about that from the Benedictine sister who said, she wrote on the marker board, "None of us is right."
Mm.
And for me, that was life changing. That was just a pivotal moment in my life to realize, well, none of us is right. And you may be right, and I may be right. Right. And what we don't know is probably way more than what we know.
Mm.
And it's good to admit that.
Yeah.
I think.
Part of the beauty of the mystical way of looking at things and the Eastern way of looking at things and the scientific way of looking at things. I mean, in science, they say it's not just a bunch of billiard balls. It's a field. We live in a field, and the table's not as solid as you think it is, and the air is not as empty as you think it is. There's not such a clear boundary between them, and there's a lot of dualism in Christianity. Christianity starts in Genesis with division. We're going to divide, day and night, and ground and water, and plant and animal and man and woman. Then you go to church. We're going to divide clergy and laity and straight and gay. There's a lot of division and facing off. I had a really interesting experience. The place we go in Colorado, there's a lot of spirituality there, and they had several elders from an indigenous tribe in Colombia who were there to talk about their tradition and their practices and their wisdom. And you can read about them on the internet. They think of themselves as the elder brother, and they think of the rest of the world as a younger brother. And they think, we live here right in the middle of nature on this beautiful mountain. We're really connected to the universe, and we see a lot of things that maybe you don't see. So they're all enthused about climate change, deforestation, strip mining, extinction of species. They have a lot of existential kinds of concern for the planet. And after 3 days, somebody asked them, "What is the greatest threat to your culture?" And the answer was evangelism. And if you think about it, all of the indigenous people here and a lot of other places, it wasn't such a great benefit to them when the Europeans came and said, "Well, no, don't worship your ancestors, worship these European saints, and don't find God out in nature, find him in this building, and don't think about the practices that your elders taught you, read this book." And it was really kind of stunning. And I wish that some of the people that are enthused about evangelizing could have heard that, because it was really a pretty powerful statement.
Mm-hmm.
They said, people bring education to us. They bring technology. They bring healthcare. Those are all good things. But if we have to have a dose of Christian evangelism with it, keep it all. We're doing fine up here on the mountain.
Yeah. What have you discovered about, let me just say that both of us right now are trying to learn as much as we can about trauma and trauma-informed practices and so on. And what have you learned about those kind of things, our emotional, psychological? I mean, with your journeys, you talked about your anger and things like that. Surely you've had to heal from some of that.
Of course.
What are your insights on that?
Yeah, that is a great question. One of them, Brene Brown, who I like her fine, but I'm not a big fan. But she said one of the most compelling things I ever heard one day. So, she did a study of what are the characteristics of compassionate people. And the answer was they have boundaries. And I thought it was counterintuitive to me, but it makes sense when you think about it. They know how they're supposed to be treated. They know how they're supposed to treat other people. Not going to do it. They're not going to abuse people. They're not going to put up with a lot of abuse. So I thought that the idea of boundaries was helpful. Now with me, that helped in some relationships that I had with people where I had a lot of anger, and and first I said, we've had some anger here. Part of it's me, maybe all of it's me. If it's me, I'm sorry. But we can do better, and I want to do that. But I have boundaries, and this is not about you. You can live your life however you want. This is about me, and I'm going to tell you where my boundaries are. So to me, this is okay, and this is not okay, and that's how I play. And the other thing is, again, Eastern religion it's not dualistic. We don't put a lot of credence in things like self or soul or free will, and so I give myself a little more room, and I give other people a little more room. First of all, because we're all one. If it hurts him, it hurts me. Hurts her, it hurts me. Second of all, because people are influenced by their surroundings. They do things before they think about them. They have different biology and chemistry and physics. Somebody said, is Jeffrey Dahmer in hell? I don't know. I don't know anything about his biology and chemistry and physics. I don't know anything about his upbringing. I don't know if I had the same biology and chemistry and physics and the same upbringing, whether I'd be, chawing on a leg right now.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
So, it reverses a lot of the where you think about justice and punishment. What is that? If I was on a jury and somebody said, okay, Mr. Oneness, now you're on a murder trial. Now, someone's life is in your hands. You just think everything's okay. You just think, you might be Jeffrey Dahmer. And in the trial, the guy was obviously guilty. He was obviously committed a terrible act. He obviously had done something that's almost unforgivable. And he had done it several times, and he was going to do it again. And so, as the jury talked about it, they said, well, this is not about punishment per se, because punishing someone doesn't really help. This is not about deterrence per se, because this guy can't be deterred. This is just to protect society. So the jury gave him a big old sentence to protect society. But our idea of justice was protecting people, not punishing people. And, so I try to live that way. And our relationship, Jill and I have always had a great relationship, but it's gotten much better since we've been on this journey. We just communicate better. We have less anger. We cut each other more slack. Again, you might be right. I mean, you can't imagine how many fewer fights you get into if you're just able to say, you might be right. And,
Right.
And to depersonalize it. In Buddhism, this is really important. There's sort of three marks of Buddhism. And one is that suffering is part of life. And, you do the best you can to reduce it or mitigate it or eliminate it. The second is this idea of impermanence, that, everything changes. And so, you can't go back to the past, and you can't think about the future. You have to live right now. That's the place where, nothing changes right now. Oh, second later, it's already changed. And then the third thing is this idea of no self. And to depersonalize things, it's just much easier. It's a much better way to live. And I'll give you a great example. People think when I say that I'm cold, that, I'm not humane, that I don't have compassion. I was having trouble meditating in a Zendo. We go to these 3 and 4 day retreats, and we meditate for 10 hours. And there's a lot of chatter in your head, and you're trying. So the first thing I did is said, just take the chatter out. Next time you come to Zendo, leave Larry Jordan outside. And so instead of thinking, I'm this, I'm that, I'm just thinking, this is happening. I took my personhood out of it. Well, the first morning I did that, one of our teachers walked in, and she's a person who I love, but she just grates on me a little bit. She just irritates me. And so I'm just going to approach life impersonally. She walked in the door, and I had this overwhelming sense of just unconditional acceptance and love. And because I started with a clean slate, and, people say, well, I think we should bring our hearts into things. Well, if your heart is pure, but if somebody walks in the door and you think, well, this person she's irritating, you're not going to have a good conversation.
That's true.
And you didn't give her a very fair shot at it. So it just helped. It helps me every day just to be less personal about things, just to realize the connection, to feel a sense of oneness, but not to get all tangled up in my ego versus the other person's ego. And, we're talking about how to overcome trauma. The other thing is, Abraham Maslow developed this hierarchy of needs, and it's well accepted, and it's all about self-actualization. Well, he wrote a book that was released after he died called, I think it's called The Farther Reaches of Human Nature. And he said, once you actualize yourself, transcend yourself. Realize that your life is not just about yourself. It's not your ego against somebody else's ego. Recognize the oneness, as the Zen people would say, discover your true nature. Realize that your self is no self, is the same self as everybody else's self. And he said that that people, self-transcenders, have they're warmer, they're more compassionate. In some ways, they're more courageous, because they don't have so much ego in the game. And people said to him, well, what about self-actualized people? Isn't that a good thing? Well, yeah, it's a good thing, but that means your egoic self is well adjusted. But this game is not about your egoic self. It's about your true self. It's about your true nature. It's about who you are after you peel off all the layers. Who am I at the bottom? If I take away, my biology and chemistry and physics and my conditioning and all my experiences and all my relationships, we're indistinguishable. And theologically, if we die and the only thing that migrates is our indistinguishable whole, our indistinguishable part of the true self, well, who gets punished or rewarded? How would you send people through one door and not another?
Yeah. How do you suffer in hell without a brain or a body?
Well, yeah. Exactly.
So we're running out of time already. Enough. But give us the pitch on the book. No, I don't mean that to be derogatory, but just what's it called? What's the subtitle? And
where can people find it?
Where can people find it? And what's it about? I know you've mentioned it at times, but just all in one place.
Okay. It's my first and only book. It's called The Way. Oh, look, that's backwards. Meaningful Spirituality for a Modern World. Starts with a Zen quote. To study the way is to study the self. Are we good? To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be enlightened by all things. To be enlightened by all things is to remove the barrier between self and other. So the first half of the book is deconstructing, and the second half is reconstructing. A lot of things we've talked about are in the book. There's also enough autobiography in it just so that people understand, well, this guy, he wasn't raised on an ashram or something. He's an altar boy.
Yeah.
And he wasn't always this fuzzy guy. He was a pretty, cold character when he started out. So I'm really excited about it. Now, it's really difficult, as you know, to publish a book. One of the problems is nobody in the book business reads books. They're doing book deals. So they say things like, tell me about your book in 250 words. Well, we've been talking for an hour, so how would I do that in 250 words? So I'm at the process right now. There's one or two people I'm waiting to hear from. I'm probably going to self-publish it. I'm glad to do that. I'm ready to do that. So right now, where can you get it? You can get it in the trunk of my car.
Contact Larry.
And I have about 13 copies left, and I just got a call today. It's going to be another book club, and they need 10 of them. So
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Most folks don't do this. I had the book edited, I had it designed, I had it formatted, and I had a bunch of them printed. I had 200 or 300 books printed. So at this point, I've given away, like I say, all but 3 or 4, given away or sold, and I've done both. I've already distributed more than most self-published authors. I've already made more than most self-published authors. I really didn't do it because I wanted to make a lot of money. I wrote it for my kids. So at this point, it's all gravy. So I hope within the next few weeks, it'll either be published or self-published. You'll be able to get it on Amazon or in your bookstore in your library. I have a website, LarryJordanAuthor.com. I have an email, LarryJordanAuthor@gmail.com. So I'm easy to find. If you Google Larry Jordan Author, you'll see the way. I love to talk to people about it. I love to talk to people about their books. I mean, I've enjoyed the books that you guys have written. So, and it's been just like this. You know, the book brought you two into my life. There's 100 other people it brought into my life. Your books brought me into your life.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't really get that when I wrote the book. I didn't realize that I was going to have these really deep connections with people. But it's really one of the best reasons to write a book. I think it really is.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about it. But no, it's embarrassing. People say, I can't find your book anywhere. I say, that's because it's not anywhere. And, you know, people said things to me like, well, send me a copy. And I would send them a copy and go, oh my gosh, don't send that to anybody. I said, why not? I said, well, it looks too much like a book. I said, it is a book. No, because you're talking to editors and agents and publishers, and they want to see a manuscript that's fresh out of the typewriter, you know.
Yeah.
So is it a mistake that I printed 300 of them? I don't think so, because that's what we're doing here, and that's why people are doing book studies about it, and that's why I give talks at churches and libraries. So I'm sorry I don't fit into your box, but you know, my way is working for me.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and I think you're right that even people that have a publisher, probably most of them have moved less books than you moved, and it's all about for me, writing does something to me. It helps me know what I think. It helps me process. But then when you're able to share that with somebody and they benefit from it, when they resonate with it, they connect with you. It's a good thing, you know, and it doesn't, you know, we're always about the movie star that made millions, you know, or the author that's a New York Times bestseller. But I would say most of the real work, most of the real connection is made in smaller circles, you know, smaller groups.
Very well said. Yeah.
Well, man, I'm sorry we're already out of time. This feels exactly like the other day when we had things together.
Except your wife is missing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we may have to do a part 2 later, and if she wants to, bring her into the mix. When you get decided where everything's going to land and how you're going to do it, we can help you launch it or whatever. So
yeah, for sure.
That would be great. I appreciate it. She's actually going to be. She's, as you know, pretty special, and she's going to be speaking in a few weeks on She's a painter and an artist, creativity and spirituality. So
nice.
She's got some credentials herself. So
love to hear that.
Absolutely.
We would enjoy that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Well, for those out there in the audience, we appreciate you listening in. Our podcast has gotten a bump lately. I have no idea why, and probably if I could explain it, I would have messed it up. But we're glad that you're tuning in, you're listening. Hope you're going to enjoy the new book, Leaning Forward, but also that you'll do your best to contact Larry and see what's going on with his publication. And as always, we invite you to be where you are, be who you are, and be at peace.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us today on the Desert Sanctuary.
Remember, all that wander in the desert are not lost. We hope that you know
you are seen,
you are heard,
and you are loved.